Well, the Juice chose Georgetown, and Carolina's roster is now seemingly locked in. Is it enough?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, August 8th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined today by our guy, Coach Bill Robinson, the head coach of the Milligan University Buffaloes and a 2-decade veteran of Carolina Basketball School. And you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. And we want to give a special shout out to all you everydayers and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. So glad that you're all here. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Going to be a fun show today. We've kept on rolling, but this is the first show back kind of in real time with me getting back from my vacation. So I'm so glad to be back with you all. And I know that Coach and I are excited to be back hitting the grind today as well. Going to be a fun show. We're talking about Carolina and missing out on the Juice. So the roster seemingly set. What does it mean? What does it look like? Is there enough? All of that. We're going to get to looking at Carolina is a 2 seed in Lunardi's latest bracketology. And we just want to try to figure out why so many national media are higher on the Tar Heels than seemingly maybe a lot of Tar Heels folks are. And of course, Coach is here with us. So we're going to have story time with Coach Rob. That's going to be great. Coach, how about this one? I just realized this a couple minutes before we started recording. 3 months to the day from today, Carolina and Kansas in Fog Allen Fieldhouse. How about that? It's coming. Let's go. I'm so excited. All right, Coach, let's get to this. On Monday, Juice chose Georgetown. It kind of felt like it was trending that way, but it took until Monday until it was made official. And so, look, Carolina misses on yet another big man, but now we know the roster and what it is. So we want to take stock of that. Let me just run us through quickly the 11 scholarship level players. At kind of the guards, RJ Davis, Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble, and Ian Jackson. Wings, Drake Powell, Cade Tyson. And in the front court, Jalen Washington, Jalen Withers, Zayden High, Van Allen Lubin, and James Brown. So, Coach, the question is, the roster is now set pending any other weird, unforeseen circumstances. Is it enough? Let's take stock of this thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the guards are maybe the best in the country. I mean, we've got depth, we've got guys who can score, you got guys who can defend, we got a lot of different options. There's going to be a lot of flexibility there. I think our wings are very solid too. So you're talking about 1 through 3, maybe even sneaking into a little bit with 4 with Cade Tyson. The question is going to be, our post play. I think everybody feels that way. I think that's why everybody wanted to get that one more guy. It didn't happen early, and I'm obviously we would have taken Juice. It would have been great, but it's a little late. And like you talked about with the trip, the beach trip and all that bonding, and to bring somebody in almost would feel like a stranger. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Let's just focus on what we have. And I think there's a lot of potential at the big spots inside the center spots, especially Jalen Washington to come out and say, hey, he's ready to earn it. He's ready to fight for time. And I think Zayden High's talked about the same thing. He's just going to force their hand, and that's what you want to do. You want to have a kid play so well, you have to play him, and it's going to be very competitive. It's going to be daily competitive, and I think to add somebody late like this would have been a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that angle of it, Coach. Every time I've thought about that, I've thought back. Have you ever seen the movie Miracle about the U.S. hockey team beating USSR? There's a scene in that. I don't honestly even know if it's real life, but there's a scene in the movie where Coach Herb Brooks wants to there's this kid that's been going off in college hockey that season, and they talk about bringing him in late, and the guys come together and say, we don't want him, Herb. We don't want him. I'm trying to do the accent. And he says, why not? He's phenomenal. He's great. He says, because we're a family. And Coach, you just mentioned it. We talked about it last time you and I did a show together about Carolina just went off on that Outer Banks trip that they took last year as well. And so Carolina would have been adding Juice after that trip, which is probably your most foundational family forming trip and moment that this team will have. whether you've experienced that as a coach or not, why is that so difficult? And do you maybe dodge something of a bullet there with looking at the continuity that you've already built?
Yeah, I think you're already starting to develop roles, and guys are anticipating, well, this is where I'm going to be, this is where, and then all of a sudden you add somebody. They added Big James Conquo last year, and again, they were even hesitant about doing that because they didn't want to upset Armando. They didn't want everybody to feel like you're bringing somebody in to fight for time. I think the guys have spent so much time together in the summers already, even before the beach trip, being able to be in the gym, and you're starting to kind of get a feel for where do I fit in, and then all of a sudden to bring somebody else in can upset some people. And just the chemistry is going to be so important this year, as it is every year. But even more so, I think now with Armando leaving and just somebody else going to have to step up there, we need to just, I think, focus on ourselves right now, not worried about trying to add somebody else to the mix.
And you referenced it a minute ago, but there is something to, if Carolina had been able to add that earlier, when it was Cliff Omori or Umar Ballo or any of those guys that you were talking about, that's a whole different ballgame in terms of the chemistry of this. Is that an accurate statement for me to make?
Correct. And you want those guys to be there early, June, be able to go through those early classes, to be able to go through those. They even had a Make-A-Wish thing where you're just spending time together. That's the time I think is most valuable. It's not the practice time, it's not the pickup time. It's the time where they're off the court, they're spending time, they're getting to know each other, and that's where that family bond is built. So I think to add somebody in, it almost be like having a stepchild. I understand that from a personal perspective, it's different. You're part of the family, but you're not really quite part of the family sometimes. So I think we just got to focus again on us and where we are, and you can't look back. At this point, you just got to look forward.
And if we're being honest, because continuity looks so different in this transfer portal era where seemingly every team not named Marquette and Purdue, who literally are the only two major conference teams that didn't bring in a transfer, believe it or not, everyone is trying to figure out who they are and how we find chemistry and continuity and how we grow together as a team. And so now chemistry and continuity, the leg up is if you've already got that in place by late May, early June. And I know that sounds weird, but that's the lay of the land where things are at right now. And look, I know, Coach, that it's clear from what this is an action speaking louder than words thing where we haven't really heard from the coaching staff about it, but their actions have suggested that they clearly wanted another big, right? Or else they don't continue to pursue these guys over, guy after guy after guy, miss after miss after miss, but you don't get it. And so you just say, I don't care if I was kind of getting recruited over, we're going to make it happen. How do you get those guys in that right frame of mind to say, even though maybe you weren't choice 1A, here's how we're doing it?
Well, you're going to play the hand that you're dealt. And the coaching staff constantly, you always want that better card. You want something that'll give you better odds to win, obviously, in a card situation. But at this point, you're sitting there and you're talking to your guys saying, hey, you're our guy. You're the one we wanted. You're the one we've been fighting for. We chose you already. We chose you early. You've been part of this program for a while anyway. Somebody like Zayden High, I think if you just can put some confidence into him and really say, hey, man, you're going to play this amount of 10 minutes a game, 15 minutes a game, whatever it's going to be, and really give him that kind of confidence, he's going to play at a super high level for whatever you give him. And I think he'll be very happy. I think he could be very efficient in a role like that and could be very productive. But it's time now you sit there and say, okay, this is who we are. This is the hand we've been dealt. Now let's go out and really focus on the mental side of these guys, really try to build them up, and the player development side, the development between now and that 3 months that you talk about before they go to Fog Allen. That's really what the key is now. Let's forget about the recruiting aspect. Let's get in the gym. Let's really develop these guys.
Carolina, at Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology, is a 2 seed. Tied for the highest in the ACC with Duke. And I think maybe a lot of Carolina fans and others don't get it, but a lot of maybe national guys are predicting Carolina higher than a lot of inside people see. Why is that? We're going to talk about it in just a second. Right after I tell you about game time. Going to MLB games in the summer is one of my favorite all-time things to do. The game, the food, the people, everything that's part of that experience. And I'm excited to make all new memories this summer at the ballpark. But thankfully, when I get tickets for that, I don't have to sweat last minute high price tickets because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. In fact, prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Coach and I just talked about it. Carolina, Kansas, 3 weeks from today. Coach, I checked out most recent prices. I know we speculated a couple weeks ago. Right now, the cheapest ticket on Game Time is $716. Or hey, if you want to fork out a little bit more, you can go to row 10 just to the side of center court for $2,178 a ticket. Yowza, I don't have that kind of money. But here's the thing. Why don't you go ahead and just take the guesswork out of buying any of your tickets with Game Time? Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Last week, Joe Lunardi published his most recent bracketology, and I know it's such a crapshoot, honestly, at this time of year, as we were talking about with roster construction and everything. But Coach, in so doing, he moved the Tar Heels up into a 2-seed range. And interestingly, his little blurb at the top was all about the Tar Heels. Coach, I just want to read part of it really quick. He says, Cooper Flagg and Duke have grabbed all the offseason attention, but it might be that North Carolina is the favorite when the ACC conducts its preseason poll in October. The Tar Heels have risen to a number 2 seed in our latest projection, and the reason is a solid veteran core that ranks among the best in the country. And he goes on to talk about all of that. And at the very end, he says Drake Powell, Ian Jackson, and James Brown round out a rotation that could very well equal that of their Durham rivals. So, Coach, you and I are talking about this every day. We see what's going on in Discord and in other Tar Heel forums. And what I first want to ask you before we even talk about national versus inside media and fans, in your opinion, is this 2 seed a fair assessment of the Tar Heels? Is it too high or is it too low? And I know I'm asking you to do what's nearly impossible this time of year, but where is your head at on that?
I think it's fair. I think with RJ, with what he did last year and the year he had, and the anticipation of what he could do this year, and guards, and let's be honest, you have to have great guards. If you're going to go deep in March and hopefully into April, you have to have great guards. Carolina's got great guards. All right. And the coaching staff will figure out the post situation, but they got great guards. I think part of the Carolina faithful, as you say, we all learn to be negative. We all, oh, we're not that good. We're not that, and I think it's like coaching your kid. I think it's impossible as a dad who I did coach my son in college. It's almost impossible to really judge how good they are because you're either that, hey, my kid's the greatest ever and he's always going to play, or
ball.
Yeah, or my kid can't do a thing. And I had to battle with my coaching staff because my staff always thought when we ranked our kids, my staff always said, my son was higher than what I thought because he's my kid, so you just look at him a little bit different. I think that's how fans look. Hey, this is my team. And, we haven't won the national championship, every year. So, of course, we're not going to a top 8 pick at the end. That's part of it. I think it's just we're so familiar with our guys, so familiar with our team that it's hard to believe that we could be a 2 seed. Really, at the same time, our heart set absolutely better than Duke. My conversation with Hubert at the end of the summer, he absolutely just was so happy about how well they played last year against them. He just feels very confident with that rivalry, and it was really fun to see him kind of get excited. And hey, he didn't care about Cooper Flagg. He didn't care about their recruiting. He was just focused on our guys and just felt like, hey, we're still better than they are.
Oh man, that's so interesting. I wonder what it, aside from just, because I love that analogy of coaching your own child, because I'm right with you. I am so much more critical than others would be. So, Coach, what is it that perhaps we see as weakness or perhaps missing from the roster that other national people or people outside looking in look at this and say, no, 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 no. This is a really, really good roster. And I know you've already said RJ in the backcourt, but in totality, I mean, do you think they're saying RJ and Elliot's growth and all of that is enough? Like, how are they reaching those conclusions and so many of us aren't?
I think they're seeing maybe the Ian Jackson and the Drake Powell now more than what we do. Because those are two guys that I think are really going to surprise even the Carolina people. Drake goes back to our first conversation about Drake Powell in the summer, early this summer. And he was very impressive at camp. He was obviously, I've read some stuff about him this summer. He's been very impressive in his travels around the country this summer. Those are two guys that, I think that we know they're good. We think they're going to play. That's kind of how we're looking at it. I think they're going to play. I think they're going to play a lot. I think they're going to be very productive. And I think it's going to be the difference between, being a 4 or 5 seed maybe and being a 1, 2 seed. It's going to be those two guys. And then who's going to be the big guy to step up? James Brown, I really like him. And it's more of a, hey, he's just a great kid. He was fun to be around. He was super nice. He had super energy, not super talented right now, but I could see him finding a role and a niche with this team where he could maybe get some minutes there and be that guy that maybe just be that spark inside that we just need. That shot blocker guy can run the floor and make some things happen at the offensive end, off rebounding and just being those little hard, extra effort type plays.
And I think I wonder if part of it is we're so used to relying so heavily on a traditional big man like Armando, who's been here, who's literally played for the Tar Heels the last half decade, right? And even before that goes back to the end of the Roy Williams era, and so everything before that is very traditional big as well. This is the first time that we have to stop and take stock of what may be a roster that relies on a more modern style of play and a more modern, less reliance on a big and more just asking a big to help the guards and to help the wings and to not play through that person as much. So they almost function more as like a tight end or an offensive lineman or something, where it's like, hey, you'll utilize them heavily at times, but at others, we're really relying on the skill position guys, thinking of, in this case, the guards and wings. Do you think that is part of this conversation as well?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to change everything. I think even if we watch them in practice now, which I hope to get to a practice before our season starts, but it's going to be completely different than what we've seen, obviously, with Armando. And I think we've seen it change even when Hubert took over. He had his own ideas, but I think you're going to see more and more tempo. I think you're going to see a lot more quick offense. We talk about the 2-minute offense. We've got a series that it's just pistol stuff that you see a lot in the NBA, but you're going to see a lot quicker actions, maybe more less plays and more just concepts. And I think that's what more and more people are going to today anyway. But I got to see a little bit of that this summer just in their open gym type situations. But it's going to be really fun. It's going to be wide open. I think you're going to see him score a lot more points than we have in the last couple of years.
I think that's a great point, what you just said about the Hubert Davis kind of tweaks and stuff. For example, last year was maybe Armando's most impactful all-around year, but some of those numbers, some of those counting stats came down a little bit. But the way he was valuable as a defender, the way he was valuable with his shot blocking presence and things like that, that's not as easy to just look at a box score and see was showing up as well. And so almost in the way that Leaky Black was such a dynamic defender, but you don't just realize it through total blocks and total steals, right? You look at the early work that he did. Because I think for so many people, it's so easy to just look at a box score and say, yes, he did well. No, he didn't do well. So how do you now evaluate these new and different roles for the bigs?
Yeah, I think one of the things we just X and O wise, Brad Frederick and I talked Caleb Loves last year. They ran a lot of horn sets, and they put the 3 best players, Armando, RJ, and Caleb, in situations where they were the primary, ball handlers, whether it was catching and passing, or obviously not just dribbling, but they were the guys who were going to make the majority of the decisions. They were going to get the majority of the shots. So they ran a lot of sets to make sure that those three guys had lots of touches. I don't think you do that with this group. You're going to have five guys on the floor that can all play, they can all score, they can all make decisions. They're all going to be able to handle a little bit too, at least be able to make a jab step and a one dribble and attack the rim. So more so than having Armando there, you can have somebody at least get by somebody and then have to make a decision. So I think the concept area works better because now you've got five guys can just play. They can play off each other, and the ball will find RJ. Let's be honest. The ball will find him. He'll find ways to be able to create his own shots when he needs to. It's not like he's going to get less shots, but I think we can see less of those actual sets and just letting the guys go play.
And you see it in like the decision making. For example, Van Allen Lubin and Cade Tyson both have very low turnover percentages. I can't remember them both off the top of my head, but it's like 10% and below, which is very, very, very good, especially for Van Allen Lubin, a big where you think about, Mondo's being, I think it was in the teens maybe last year. And so if you got guys who you trust to make decisions, put the ball in their hand, let's go play. And man, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. All right, gang, it's coming every time we got Coach on. It's time for story time with Coach Rob. And so we're going to hit that coming up in just a second. If you're a regular with our show, you know that Coach Bill Robinson is working on a book of Carolina basketball school lore and his 2 decades of working the camp there in the summer. Well, I am sitting here on my computer screen staring at the cover of the book, Carolina Basketball School History, Stories, and Drills. Coach, I am elated for you. We're getting this thing going. I know that you are just like, let's get this bad boy done. I want it in my hands. So proud of you. I love the cover. It's going to be great. And I know that people are going to love it. So congrats to you on that. You're almost there. The light of the tunnel is coming. So Coach, that said, what's today's story that you're going to share with us?
Yeah, the book's done. So I just set my last edits in. So meeting with the guy, actually this is going to post on Thursday, meeting with the guy Thursday to talk about the printing of it and getting some books in my hand. So I'm very excited about it. I think it's very appropriate. The last 2 people that I met with for the book was an hour-long interview with Hubert, and then sitting down and watching the alumni game this summer with Coach Williams. So they were the last 2 guys I needed to talk to, and the time with Hubert's always so valuable. But he told me a story when he was a camper at camp. He went 9 years. His dad said you can go to 1 camp, but you can only go to 1. And he went to Carolina camp every year. The only other camp he went to was when he got invited to 5-star back in the day. But he was there, and Dudley Bradley was known as he was a defensive guru. He was the defensive stopper of the time, and he had just graduated. He was playing some pro ball, and the minister of defense, or whatever, he had a nickname about how great of a defender he was. So he got to pick out 1 kid out of the stands to come play him one-on-one. He was just going to defend. Well, he picked out Hubert. And I think it was intentional, being Walter Davis's son, that you were going to bring somebody out. You're going to know who that kid is. Well, he brought him out, and Hubert scored on him. And then he checked up, and Hubert scored on him again. And Dudley went over and kind of tied his shoes a little tighter and made sure that he was actually ready to play. Well, Hubert scored on him like 6 or 7 times in a row. And Hubert, his intensity comes out even during the interview, and he says, I was ready. I was ready to go. And he kind of embarrassed, Dudley in this situation. Coach Smith was there. Coach Smith saw that, and he watched this defensive stopper of his who was such a great defender, and now this high school kid, I think he was 16 at the time, and he knew who Hubert was, but he at that point had said he wasn't really good enough to play at Carolina. Right. Hubert believes that was the moment that he said, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I need to take a little closer look at this kid. Maybe he can play for us. But Hubert just very fondly is reminded of that wonderful time at camp. And he really believes that if it hadn't been that moment, if he hadn't been in camp, that he probably wouldn't have got that offer to come play at Carolina. So Carolina camp played a big part of his life into getting him into Carolina. And now, obviously, all the way to the point where he's now the head coach. So pretty cool.
Man, that's a great story. I would have loved to have, I'm guessing Walter Davis his uncle probably wasn't in the building that day, but I would have loved to have just stood by him and heard his inner monologue while he was watching his nephew Hubert do that to the Minister of Defense there. That would have been really neat. And to hear Dean Smith's thoughts as he was watching that unfurl too, man, what a moment. Coach, thank you for sharing that. Other thoughts on it?
Well, it's an Olympic year. So one of the other cool things about that conversation was in 1976, Hubert's 6 years old, and they drove from North Carolina up to Montreal to watch the Olympic team and to watch his uncle Walter and his friend, this guy named Phil Ford, who was one of his, friends he used to hang out with. And after they won the Olympic gold, he drove home with Phil and Walter. And they have a picture of him in the museum at 6 years old with both gold medals wrapped around his neck. And he says, I remember that. He's a 6-year-old. I remember driving all the way back. He was there to see Bruce Jenner, which is kind of ironic now, at the Olympic Stadium. And he said they went to all the events and got to just be part of the Olympics as a 6-year-old, but also knowing that, your uncle and your friend Phil just happened to be part of the gold medal winning Olympic basketball team.
Pretty cool. What became of Walter's gold medal after his passing last year? I'd be interested to hear that.
If I can find out more, we got some contacts in that area. I may see if I can find out.
you know a person or two, man, and looking very much like the men are going to bring home another gold medal for the Stars and Stripes. So pretty cool stuff. Man, I love Olympic time, Coach. It's so fun to watch it all come together. All right, gang, what a fun show today. Great conversations about the Tar Heels. Great story from Coach Rob. Really appreciative of that. Get ready for the book. You're going to want to make sure you get a copy when it comes out. So thanks for joining us today on the show. If you haven't subscribed to Locked On Tar Heels, very easy to do both on YouTube and on audio. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you haven't joined the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, we'd love to have you in there. It's free to join, and the link for that's in the show notes. You just click on it and come be part of our great community. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the week. But until then, I want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again then on Friday. But until then, peace.